Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 2nd of June 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Patrick Henningsen.
Hello, Brian.
Nice to see you. I know you're still a bit jet lagged. You only got in yesterday. How are you feeling this morning?
Oh, chipper as always. It's the beautiful, clean Plymouth air.
And the sunshine.
Really wakes you up in the morning. It's phenomenal.
Good. Well, the sun is shining now in Plymouth. It came through the grey skies at 10 o'clock this morning. Beautiful day here. So do we really mind what the weather is in the rest of the country?
I think it's probably pretty similar.
Apparently not, actually. We've got a bit of greyness going on, almost sunny in Poole, Dorset. So we've got a very interesting news today. We've taken some local UK items, but also we're going to be chatting with Patrick about really what's happening in the States, how he sees things. And we've got some interesting crossover with some quite strange things taking place in UK and elsewhere. But we'll just start off by having a little look at you sat in the studio, Russia Today. I believe you've been giving some interviews.
Mm-hmm.
This one, particularly fine photograph, I think. And also here you are in the studio, which is nearly as big as the UK Column studio. Is that right?
A little bit bigger, yeah. A whole floor of an office building downtown. No, that's RT America. This is their sort of American broadcast outlet there, just a few blocks from the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Nice facility. But we had a debate about U.S. foreign policy with a U.S. academic from San Francisco and also policy advocate and lobbyist and good political mind, another colleague from Washington, D.C. It was a great discussion.
So how does Russia Today manage to sit so close to the seat of power?
I don't know, but I think they probably, like anybody in this country as well, have to be very careful and wary of the regulators, the broadcast regulators. So we have Ofcom equivalents in the United States, and I'm sure they're looking for any opportunity to snipe at someone like RT.
Right. So I believe that they push out quite a lot of international news there, so not such a strong focus on what's happening in the US.
Only for a few hours a day, and then outside of that, it's documentaries and international news primarily. So it's very international broadcast, even in America. Although there's a couple of local shows. Great financial program called Boom Bust.
Right.
So I'm not promoting RT here. It's a Kaiser Report, which we're familiar with, Max Kaiser, and this other show called Boom Bust. Great financial programs. So if you're following the markets, they're much better than what's on NBC and some of the other networks.
Okay. Well, I've been in America myself for 2 weeks while you were here in UK. Then you went back again. I didn't look at any mainstream American news. I did look at some local newspapers, which we'll mention in a minute. But
you weren't missing anything.
I probably wasn't. But are people in the States actually watching Russia Today?
Not many, unfortunately, not many. But you know what? It's not how many; it's who's watching. And I think the people, in terms of the really top radio, syndicated radio hosts in America, they watch RT International News because they talk about it on their show.
Right.
So, and they have audiences of 20 million, 30 million a day. Huge audience shares, much bigger than the television networks like CNN or Fox, for that matter, on a daily basis. So they watch it and they talk about it. And so it is influential. It's not how many, it's who is watching. And I think the people that matter are paying attention, looking for alternative news sources like this show and RT as well.
Right. Okay, well, let's jump back to Europe, and we were sent this morning, which we're taking at face value. It's apparently a Wetherspoon beer mat. I should have given you a health warning, look away if you're of a weak disposition. But the photograph, you can just make it out, is our Chancellor with Miss Lagarde.
very.
George Osborne there. I think he's about to kiss her, so it is a little bit of a disturbing picture. But apparently Wetherspoons have pushed this out on a beer mat in order to promote voting leave. So they say at Wetherspoon, we sincerely respect and admire the French people in your country, but note that you are due to stand trial in France for your part in authorising a €400 million payment by the French state to Bernard Tapie, a supporter of your political party. This follows the resignation in disgrace of your successor at the IMF, Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Why should we trust the IMF? Please see the other side for more questions. And the questions are, let's bring those up. Here we go. Is the governance of the IMF better than FIFA's? Did anyone elect you? Why is Greece in such trouble after 6 years of IMF advice? And has the IMF warned the Eurozone that no currency in history has survived without a single government? Vote, leave, take back control. Well, I'm taking this at face value. I haven't actually seen a beer mat or held one in my hand, but I'm taking this as true. It's amusing if it's simply a joke. People beginning to look in the right areas. We're looking at the financial institutions here and saying that's where the trouble's starting.
Yeah, whether you're for Brexit or against it, to me, is almost beside the point. Looking at this level of sophistication here, and this is a pub chain, right? Yeah. The level of sophistication there, which is quite a lot of insight into how the world really works. And to see that shows me that even there's the old boys who are nursing their pint are getting a dose of this, which is what we talk about every day on this program.
Yeah, and this is interesting application here because absolutely right, a very large pub group, a chain, and we're putting information not only about the European Union but the IMF and pointing a finger at the money. So it'll be interesting to see how that one pans out.
And the relationship between George Osborne and Christine Lagarde, fetching couple.
Well, we know a little bit more. We don't want to talk about that too much. Right. But which would be worse, to kiss George Osborne or Christine Lagarde?
Ooh, I don't know. Or both of them kissing each other.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on, as Mike would say. Well, here we've got a very interesting headline, which I'd like you to comment on, because I've seen this in a number of places. It's saying that the New York Times and other mainstream media outlets have actually been starting to point a finger at Saudi Arabia over involvement in 9/11 and certainly supporting trouble in Syria. Is this real? Can we take this at face value?
Well, with regards to trouble in Syria, absolutely you could. But the problem in it is with this conversation, this looks to me, Brian, like a controlled explosion, what in public relations or politics terms. So they're creating a controlled explosion with Saudi Arabia and 9/11 over here, which will go nowhere because there will be no proof that will link Saudi Arabia to 9/11. The Saudi Arabian hijackers are nothing more than a red herring to take people off on another rabbit hole, like Michael Moore's documentary Fahrenheit 9/11 did very effectively. It rooted the public into an alternative rabbit hole where there's a dead end. This is called a cul-de-sac in intellectual terms. So this is what I think they're really ramping this up. But what it also does, Brian, is they can use this as leverage, Washington, against Saudi Arabia to get them to do a little bit more or be more compliant or move them in a certain direction because they've created a public opinion swell against Saudi Arabia.
Right. So this is a bit of a warning shot across their bows that if you don't toe the line.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people worried in Washington now because Saudi Arabia is throwing money around in lobbyist terms, the way that the Israeli lobby does. They're buying influence, they're creating foundations, strings of organizations to protect their image, to protect their interests, or to protect the spread of radical Islam, for instance, through radical mosques around the world. So there are people that want to sort of put this in check a little bit, so naturally, and so this could be an expression of wanting to isolate and kind of control a little bit Saudi Arabia's aspirations as a global player.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the underlying themes that came out of our discussion before the news today was really the quality of people that we've got governing our respective countries. We just jump back to UK here. BBC reporting this one: ex-Cameron aide Patrick Rock guilty of child image offences, and. This was part of the article. Former aide to Prime Minister David Cameron's been found guilty of possessing and downloading indecent images of children as young as 10, convicted on 5 charges, acquitted of 3 similar counts, and the jury was unable to reach a verdict on the remaining 12 charges. And I'll just contrast that, of course, with our illustrious Prime Minister David Cameron, who was widely reported of being extremely dismissive of historical sex abuse claims. So David Cameron went out of his way, as more and more information came out about child abuse in Westminster, to say, oh, well, no, this is all a storm in a teacup. Now we've got one of his former closest aides coming up for child porn, basically. This sort of thing has been going on in the States as well, Boys Town and similar.
We have similar scandals historically, long-running child abuse rings organized at very high levels involving top people in the banking industry, in the political circles, and especially during the Reagan and Bush senior years.
Yeah.
These things came out in the Franklin scandal as well, Boys Town. And I think there's still Jeffrey Epstein most recently. This was dragged through the media, and Bill Clinton was attached to this.
Prince Andrew in there as well, the great and the good.
Alan Dershowitz, the great Israeli advocate and criminal lawyer, Harvard professor.
Right.
A lot of big names, attached to these scandals, and a lot of questions. And probably in the end, very little in terms of answers or justice, which always seems to be the way.
Well, it's just been allowed to gently drift, to quieten down, disappear into the long grass. As I flew over to the States, and there was a wonderful choice of videos on the aircraft, and Spotlight, the film Spotlight, was there, which several people have told me that I should have a look at, which was about exposure of child abuse in the Catholic Church in America. And I watched that film. Why do I bring that up? Well, let's just have a look at some of the things that Archbishop of Canterbury Welby has been saying on the subject of child abuse. This is going back to October 2014, but he admits that child abuse had been rampant within the Church of England. When we showed this before, we put up a bit of comment from him. The betrayal of Christ in such behaviour is complete, is what he said. Now, this was after a mother had been basically hounding the church, saying, when are you going to tackle this issue? And we said, is this statement a statement of regret, a betrayal of the church, or is it a statement that the abuse of children is the ultimate satanic act, where the betrayal is? So we're saying, what is in the mind of this man? And we've got to the point of saying, well, is Mr. Welby a Christian? And many people would question whether he is. But we've got this incredibly toxic mix of politicians involved with child abuse. Senior people in the church know that it's going on in the church as well, but nobody wants to talk about it.
I think the interesting thing, you brought up this film Spotlight. I think we talked about this when we were discussing that film, but the scandal that they broke in the Boston area, the Boston diocese of the Roman Catholic Church, involving, I think they had a list of, it could have been 80 or 85 priests.
Yes.
But if you amplify that nationally across all dioceses in America, and you look at those thousands of people involved, priests involved. So once again, a controlled explosion in the Boston area with this story is allowed to break. It releases pressure, and pressure on the church and the legal proceedings as well.
Yeah.
And then it sort of diffused at that point.
Well, that was one of the things about the film, is that at one point the new editor of the newspaper says that we need to keep going with the investigations, because if we multiply the numbers out across the country, this is vast. It's not about a few hundred priests. And so that was the theme. They then get to the point of breaking the story in Boston, as you say. But the film never then goes on to say, well, what about all the other thousands of priests that were in all of the other areas of the states? So that one was successfully suppressed.
The story burns itself off through a controlled media kind of release, as it were, but it still exists. The problem still exists, and it's a global issue.
Right.
It's not just confined to any particular diocese or city. It's a global, international issue that's organized on an international scale, in my opinion, anyway.
Okay. Well, we've got some very strange people in control of UK and the US, and we're noticing things happening in society. This was sent through to me this morning. It was inevitably, because I spent 21 years in the Navy. So the headline is, Royal Navy officer cadet who was too drunk to consent had orgasm as she was raped by a fellow student. Now, this all took place in the Britannia Royal Naval College, which is a mere 15, 20 miles down the road, a little bit further. But this is the centre of training for the officer corps in the UK, very small scale compared to the US Navy. But we're getting consistent reports, Patrick, of basically a breakdown in discipline in the military. And one of the things that's been reporting more and more is the subject of bullying. So it's not only, one hand we could say, sexual problems here. This is serious. This is accusations of rape. But we've got skylarking between the sexes. We've also now got problems within the gay community, within the armed services. And we've also got bullying coming in. Been some particularly vicious cases in the army. So this seems to be something at work under the surface, which is starting to destabilise what wasn't perfect, but was an order of discipline that worked. And I know that these kind of events have also started to creep into the US armed forces.
Well, we've had some big scandals in the United States, the tailhook scandal, and a lot of other sort of major sex scandals and things like this. But this goes to show you that the military establishment is not immune from the same changes that are happening throughout other institutions in society, in education, in civil service, in healthcare, and also this merger of these sort of private or non-governmental organizations and charities who are kind of absorbing or becoming hybrid aspects of a military institution, for instance. And so it's really not immune to any of it. It's a reflection of what's going on in the rest of society.
Right, so this is the interesting point. You've used the word change, which is a word that is now popping up everywhere. It's in policy documents in UK, it's in the paper, it's in local magazines. And I was intrigued to see in local newspapers in the States. So I'm looking at West Coast California local newspapers. And as I scan through the articles, all the wording is there. We're talking about change in school. We're talking about transformation of society. So is this a remarkable coincidence that we've got the same vocabulary being used in the UK and the US, or is there something a bit deeper, do you think?
I think it's absolutely coordinated. You have a common purpose here in the UK. You have common cause in the United States. You have purpose in the United States out of New York. So the same names of these organizations, slightly rearranged, but the agenda is absolutely the same. And this is the restructuring of public and civil service and public life, public structures, restructuring them, realigning them, agents of change coming in to basically obliterate what it seems to me.
Existing society.
Obliterate, to shatter any sort of existing moral structures, institutions, the family, anything like this. So people have no compass at the end, and people are just scattered. They have no bearing of where they stand morally, socially, in a community, and this reverberates all the way up to the nation state, Brian, obliterating national borders. And what's left at this point? What will be left is this will be problems everywhere. People will be crying out for a solution.
Because they'll be lost, effectively, disorientated and lost.
And then it's very easy to impose some sort of a feudal system at that point, a neo-feudal system that will have some structure to it. The same structure that was there before, Brian, but was smashed to bits by this invasion of the third sector into society, to disrupt, to break, to change, to transform. That's what's going on right now. That's what I can see over the last 10 or 15 years real clearly.
Well, I can certainly see that. We're going to have a look in a few minutes at some documents towards the end of the news, some documents that tend to indicate that this is a comprehensive plan. We're jumping around a bit, but we are going in a particular direction. Let's have a look at tunnelling, because we've got mainstream press here getting very excited that there's been a massive 57-kilometre and very deep rail tunnel opened in Switzerland. All the great leaders have been there. But what is fascinating about this project is the razzmatazz, in your language, about it. And so The Guardian here is saying the world's longest rail tunnel opens with theatrical parade, and they've put embedded a video on the website, which I'm going to encourage people to go and have a look at. We'll swap across from The Guardian to Russia Today, because they've also got an excellent video of this. The great and the good here, well, maybe not the good, but Angela Merkel and Mr. Hollande and Renzi, the Italian Prime Minister, they've been cuddling each other because this has been such a successful project. So 57 kilometres deep tunnel is pretty good engineering. Mm-hmm. And I think if Mike Robinson was here, he'd be saying, isn't it interesting that Switzerland can put together this type of strategic infrastructure project, but UK can't seem to do anything like this anymore. But let's just stay on the theatrical. This is part of the whole ceremony for opening the tunnel. One shot here from the video, but actually it's a vast space with a very big audience, all drenched in a red light, which I find very interesting. But what took place around this is just quite incredible, because this is part of the ceremony here. So we've got a man with a goat's head on his head. And I looked at that and I thought, this is Baphomet. This is not European pagan theatre. This is something a bit darker than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is using the event, the launch of this project, in order to display a language of symbols.
Yeah.
And so they're using this major event, which is really an engineering project that's come to completion, using it as a vehicle to show, I'm not sure how to describe it, but this other language of symbols that includes Baphomets and other sort of.
But it's not accidental,
pagan
Patrick,
pagan archetypes and Egyptology, and just like the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So this is Switzerland's Super Bowl, I guess you could say.
Well, I think we can. I'm just going to show a bit more because this one is so fantastic. Now, this is a big image. I think it is actually an image of the front of essentially the drill bit that went through the rock, went through the mountain. So we'll say, well, okay, that's pretty reasonable. But then have a look at this. This is part of the theatre. So we've got these workers in orange jumpsuits, and they walk in almost with a Germanic military march. They're looking very sombre, depressed. It's not a nice expression. They're not celebrating. They're not happy that the tunnel has opened, or it doesn't appear to be. And within no time at all, it gets into this, where they're flying around the room, tangled up in a sort of trapeze act with some form of demonic woman flying amongst them.
This is a naked woman dressed as an eagle flying amongst the orange jumpsuits.
Okay, well, I'll just show the rest because it just gets more bizarre. Well, eventually, of course, they get their jumpsuits off. And what is this? It's looking
It's a kind of a
pretty mucky.
If you watch the video of this, you can go search it on YouTube. But this is a kind of a mock orgy where you have naked men and women simulating sex acts in front of all these European dignitaries, Brian.
Right.
At the launch of this tunnel.
So this is not accidental. This is not some cheap company decided to have a laugh in front of all these heads of state of European countries. This has obviously got to be expensive. It's got to be planned, premeditated, and the ceremony must mean something to these people.
It is a ritual ceremony.
Right.
That's the only thing you could explain this as. And it has to do with, I don't know, some of the sacred feminine or the male phallus or whatever. I don't know. Not sure exactly how to translate what I'm seeing here, but it's kind of disturbing because at the end of the day, it's a hole in the ground that they're running a train through. And it's a great piece of engineering, Brian, but does it warrant having a pagan festival? Or
one wouldn't have thought so.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, we don't know what we get out of that, but we don't feel very comfortable with it. This is just something that was reported again quite some time ago, but Tesla boss Elon Musk warns that artificial intelligence development is summoning the demon. It's very interesting language, this, isn't it? He says we should be very careful about artificial intelligence, and this is the key bit here, if it comes up for me. Right, with artificial intelligence, we're summoning the demon. In all those stories, there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water. It's like, yeah, we can control him, but we can't. So we are seeing, at the moment we get into big corporate business, big projects, we've got very bizarre language being used. Is this man just having a little bit of a laugh with the public, or is he actually talking about something a bit deeper?
Well, Elon Musk is interesting, and he's typical of this kind of new billionaire class of transhumanist advocates and futurists, and he'll be with Ray Kurzweil at any number of conferences and symposiums throughout the year. They'll be sitting on the same panels sometimes, and they'll be chucking around the vision of transhumanism in the 21st century. And then he'll come with this comment, which is really sort of backpedaling on the idea of the singularity, the artificial intelligence. And he's absolutely invested in many technologies that will be part and parcel of the singularity should that come to pass.
Right.
Is this him having regrets? I'm not sure, Brian.
Or boasting.
Or boasting. It's very difficult to tell, but there's a number of high-tech gurus who have come out recently with in sort of mea culpa of technology. Steve Wozniak, founder of Apple, made a huge warning about AI. He's saying it's going to be very bad for humanity, possibly Stephen Hawking as well. The physicist has made a statement to that effect as well. But Steve Wozniak, founder of Apple, inventor of the personal computer, he has come out to say it's going to be the worst thing for humanity if AI comes online. But the problem, Brian, is AI is already online.
Yeah.
I've seen it working. I've seen demonstrations of it. It's already frightening in its infancy, Brian.
UK Column has reported that, following along from reports in other areas, that a system had been set up so that computers were able to select and generate worldwide news. So your journalist sat in wherever the Daily Mail picks up a feed which he thinks has come from a human being, but actually that news feed has been computer generated.
There's a company in Chicago, Brian. If I just give your name, your country of birth, and your date of birth, I put that into the AI, and it will generate a CV, a resume of you that will be absolutely picture perfect, that will make your head spin. And how fast it does this, Brian? In a split second.
By sucking information off the internet.
Correct.
Well, that should be interesting to read. I look forward to that. I'm just going to throw this one in. It should have been with the earlier material on the Archbishop of Canterbury, but nevertheless, it sits in a very good place here because this is a journalist, Richard Carveth, and he's been reporting out that the Archbishop of Canterbury is snubbing the victims of satanic ritual abuse. Now, what this is about is that Robert Greene, campaigner against child abuse, had contacted the Archbishop to say, would you give your support and would you speak out about what we're seeing as this ritualistic abuse? And basically he was told, well, we're only interested if the police are interested. So according to the Archbishop of Canterbury, he sort of rather lost track of his spiritual path. The police are the people to go to if you're dealing with Satanist ritual abuse. But he did say, if you can give me evidence, I'll of course, be interested. So Robert Greene provided him with evidence of real cases where the evidence is there, the police have been involved, and that has produced silence from the bishop. Mm-hmm. So very interesting stuff, which leads us in pretty nicely to this, because in your time in Washington, you've been seeing some interesting material on billboards and taking place in the streets.
Well, this is a major advertising campaign going on right now in Washington, D.C., and I was just driving down the road, stopped at a stoplight, and I turned out the window and I looked at this, which is basically promoting the atheist pride. I think there's a parade or a series of events, and this is a very expensive campaign going to promote atheism. And Freedom from Religion Foundation is the organization.
Freedom from Religion.
Freedom from Religion.
We've got some text that I think goes with this one, if we just bring that on screen.
So this has been wiped off their website, but I managed to dredge it back up again. But this is what they said about the Ten Commandments. This is Freedom from Religion. They say, do study the Ten Commandments. They epitomize the childness and the vindictiveness, the sexism, the inflexibility, and the inadequacies of the Bible as a book of morals. In essence, the first four commandments all spring, the Lord thy God has uneasy vanity, and like most dictators, most resort to threats rather than intellectual persuasion, etc. So what they're decrying the Ten Commandments. They're calling Jesus pro-slavery, and all these things, which they've actually wiped from their website since they were exposed by a blog in last year.
So they got a bit of cold feet when they went a bit too far, probably.
Yeah. So, but ironically, this is an organization that is trying to nibble and erode at the foundations of morals in a place like the United States. And how they do this is through lawsuits, by suing anybody and everybody so for the violation of church and state, for instance, and so forth. And they've
got money behind them if they're able to take on lawsuits.
Millions of dollars.
Millions
of dollars, and they have a magazine called Freedom, Free Thought. So basically, you're not free if you believe in God. You're somehow not free. You're not a free thinker, or I think it's called The Free Thinker is the name of the magazine. So it implies that you can only be free if you don't believe in anything. If you're an atheist, you don't believe in any higher intelligence or higher power, then you're free according to this organization.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
So what about this lady that we can bring up on screen? It's Annie Gaylor.
Yeah, so she runs this organization. We did a little research. She's an interesting character. And her husband, Dan Barker, they run it. It's a husband and wife team out of Madison, Wisconsin. And I did a little research, and I thought, wow, let's see, maybe she comes from a long line of activists. And sure enough, a little bit of research turns up there's her mother, Ann Gaylor. And who is Ann Gaylor? She is from the Zero Population
Growth Referral Unit.
Growth Referral Unit. So she is really one of the founders of the Zero Population Growth movement in America, and is in league and colleague of Paul Ehrlich. And these are all very prominent, you might call them eugenicists, and very much promoting abortion throughout the United States and providing funding for abortions and so forth. So very much into zero population growth. Paul Ehrlich, by the way, is one of the big proponents of man-made global warming as well.
Right.
And so he is very close to people like John P. Holdren, the president's science advisor. So again, these are all people very much into this kind of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030.
So it's a change agenda, but it's under the surface, but it's particularly hammering Christianity and any form of true spiritual belief.
Well, you're right, Brian, but not under the surface anymore. We're seeing this now come to the top now. And so they're running multi-million-dollar ad campaigns with companies like Viacom, major media outlets, who have billboards and bus stops across the country. So promoting atheist pride. And they're using very sexualized images of attractive young ladies to market this image. And I think it's really interesting when you actually go in and read some of this stuff on their website. It's not all that coherent.
Right.
It's really just kind of ad hominem attacks against Christians and anyone who believes in God. Mainly Christianity. They don't attack any other religions.
This is a very interesting
which is
point,
interesting.
isn't it? There must be. We haven't got time to get into perhaps some of the whys and wherefores, but you just asked the question: why is it that they have to go for Christianity? I think my instant answer would be because they're frightened of it, and that could open an interesting debate. We've got Freedom from Religion Foundation here. It's saying, on the whole, Jesus said little that was worthwhile. He introduced nothing new to ethics except hell. He instituted no social programs. Being omniscient, he could have shared some useful science or medicine. So this is pretty scathing stuff. We got a bit more on this one. If one purges the Judaism of the prophets and Christianity as Jesus Christ taught it, all of the subsequent editions, especially those of the priests, one is left with a teaching which is capable of curing all the social ills. So you've got to get rid of all the prophets, and then we can turn society into a better place. And this was the other one. Our legal work, well, that really says it all, doesn't it? This is what you're talking about.
This is how these organizations function, is they just attack everybody in the courts. Yep. So they just sue and they sue and they sue. This is basic, and they put people out of business. They stop organizations from doing work. They attack anybody. So, it's funny, in America, the government uses the 501c3 charitable not-for-profit status in order to attack priests during their sermons for making political rhetoric. And at the same time, you have organizations like this, which are very much supported by the highest levels of government, attacking the church as well, attacking Christianity. They don't do a whole lot of attacking of Judaism or Islam for some reason, but Christianity seems to be their main focus.
The main target.
Yeah.
Well, this is the house that permits this to go on, is this right?
That's right. Yes.
The White House.
This is the White House. So I went by the White House, and while I was there, just by coincidence, there was a lockdown outside. I was outside, but I went in to have a look, and there's a lockdown of the White House. There was a suspect package that was delivered, and the whole place went into lockdown for a few hours that day until they could figure out what exactly happened. So this happens from time to time in Washington, D.C.
And we've got snipers on the roof permanently, or at least watchkeepers.
Keep an eye on things. It's like Parliament Square. There's a lot of protests going on. Well, I don't know about Parliament Square now, but there used to be a lot of protests going on opposite the Houses of Parliament. The same thing here in the Capitol in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of protests, various protests I saw happening in front of the White House. So, and fence jumpers and people like this. So security is pretty heavy. There's one of
we ringed him there, a guy up on the roof, but on the streets we've got something different taking place. Now, one of the points that you made, Patrick, was that you were there amongst a lot of tourists who were doing all the tourist things. They're taking selfies in front of the White House, but they're not seeing what is going on. You saw the poster, and you saw this incident. What was going on here?
This is right outside the gates of the White House, and what you have here is a black or African American homeless man, maybe with some mental issues, perhaps. He's very vocal. He was talking loudly about his political beliefs. Someone complained that he was harassing the tourists, and he's being now set upon by. There was at least 4 police officers, 3 of them dressed like they work at a country club, wearing shorts and no socks, which is a kind of a funny look. for Washington, D.C. police, but there you go. These are the times we live in, Brian.
Yeah.
Cops on mountain bikes. But this poor guy, the look on his face pretty much tells it all. You know, he's the first black president, and still black homeless people getting harassed outside the White House.
Well, at least there's some outside the White House, because of course in London and other cities in UK, we're working very hard to keep those despicable people off the streets. You don't want homeless people on the streets. Good grief.
But it's funny because there's a lot of protesters out there, Brian, and for some reason, you know, some people get picked up, others don't. So I guess they're trying to manage this chaos a little bit as they see it. Yeah.
And then you've got a couple of other interesting ones here. This I thought this was a very powerful headline on this banner. In war, there are no unwounded soldiers.
Sure. This is a Memorial Day weekend, this past weekend, and it's a big day in Washington, D.C., especially for veterans. And Veterans for Peace had an amazing little camp set up here. This is just opposite the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument. And Veterans for Peace had a beautiful, they built their own Washington Monument made of little aluminum placards that people had put a message on, and they strung it together. And I saw what they were doing there, and I absolutely support, you know, the message that they're putting out, which was excellent. So we don't need to fight wars. We don't need to have soldiers coming home, period, dismembered, and so forth, fighting wars of aggression, corporate wars of profit and imperialism. I
was told an interesting little bit of information the other day. We just had the Invicta Games for the military disabled. Where did it take place? Disney. But we had people with the loss of 2, 3 limbs, and of course with the high technology additions now, they could be running or doing other things. But that took place within the environment of Disney, and the comment was that there was something slightly surreal about it. Surreal in maybe not a nice way. These people who'd undergone so much, lost limbs, terribly wounded, and now they'd sort of become high tech within a Disney environment.
Well, but Disney, the masters of theatrics, as you pointed out on the show, I think was it yesterday?
I think it might have been Mike.
Daesh Disney, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was a bit more of your comments. K Street, what's the significance of this one?
Oh, K Street is famous for the place where all the lobbyist offices are located, and this is what makes Washington move and shake. Now, I was there for a week. I met more, in terms of out on the street and at events. I ran into more lobbyists. I didn't run into any politicians or anybody who works for a politician, but I ran into tons of lobbyists.
Right.
Okay, so the lobby money is what makes that's what drives the engine of Washington. It's more than the civil service, more than the political class. It's the lobbyists. They outnumber everyone else by, who knows, a factor of 10 to 1. Yeah. There's a lobby for just about anything you can imagine in there, and they're throwing money like crazy, and it ends up in all the expensive restaurants and bars late at night, and who knows what else.
So this is big corporate money, essentially, which is driving the political machinery.
And it's driving the economic machinery as well. The price of property there is quite expensive, like London or San Francisco, and that the gentrification and the property values going up is lobby money that's really pushing that. So interesting.
Okay, and this one brought a smile to my face because when I saw it, it's so obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, I was with some people when I walked by. I pulled out my camera, and it was at night. They said, "Why are you taking a picture of the pharmacy?" And the reason I wasn't taking a picture of the pharmacy, I was taking a picture of that sandwich board outside, and they're really pushing the vaccines openly in America, very aggressive in terms of selling the vaccines. There was another pharmacy that was offering a $25 gift certificate if you got your flu shot.
Yeah.
Or your updated flu shot, for instance. So that was in the fall because flu season was supposedly being. But it's almost like a bribe. Please get your flu shot and we'll give you $25 if you get it. This is just pedestrian stuff.
Yeah.
So this is really, it's a big push. Vaccines, vaccines, vaccines. That's all you hear about in terms of the health conversation in America.
But very little dialogue on the dangers of those vaccines,
Very
apart
little,
from within
yeah.
specialist writers and periodicals. Well, I took some photographs in the States as well. I'm just going to keep this very simple. Everywhere I went was the US flag. And of course, what this was it was a statement that patriotism in America is extremely high. People are prepared to fly the flag. You don't see this in UK. Very rare that there's the national flag in somebody's private house or even a business. But everywhere we went were pictures, were the US flag. And we get into an area like this, which is a pretty wealthy urban area in suburban area in California, US flags everywhere. Do these people get any information that something isn't right with what's happening politically in their own country?
I think a lot of people have a feeling that something is off balance, but that's about as far as it goes.
Right.
And I talked about this on a program on Crosstalk, which was aired on RT yesterday. And I said that the public, we talked about gaslighting on this program before, but the public is being gaslighted by the mainstream media, by
Right.
Fox, by all these major media outlets, and by the political leadership who are echoing this kind of agenda, if you will. And gaslighting means that people get so disoriented that they have no idea or ability to think for themselves or to make value judgments on their own as individuals. Rather, they have to go with the groupthink, and the groupthink agenda is set by the media. 100%. I was shocked, Brian, at the people even involved in foreign policy related organizations, even in the Capitol, that have such a high level of cognitive dissonance with anything to do with what the United States does overseas.
Yeah.
They don't want to know. They don't know. They don't want to know.
Yeah.
And the conversation ends there. And anything beyond that, and whatever the selective talking points are, like Shiite versus Sunni, or the popular sort of paradigms that get rolled out for public mass consumption, nobody wants to know. They don't want to know details. They don't want to know facts on the ground. They don't want to know any alternative dialogue to what is coming down that narrow pipeline.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. It's quite frightening when you consider that's in the capital of the United States.
Yeah. Well, I took a couple of alternative photographs as well. We just bring them in pretty quickly. There's this one here. This was in a lay-by close to a park that I went to with some of the family. If I highlight what was on it, it says active antennas are mounted on the outside face of this building. Well, it was a telegraph pole, what I'd call a telegraph pole. Stay back a minimum of 3 feet. The point was that I stumble across a box, which then tells me you don't want to be too close to this box. You're going to be irradiated. And I found that fascinating. And we wonder how many of these AT&T boxes there are across America.
And why they don't have a fence around them that's 6 feet in diameter.
And why they don't have a fence around them. And then this was fairly close by, but essentially we've got another one here. I think I can blow this up a bit. So we've got caution. Basically, we're talking about radiation here. And it's saying that radio frequency fields beyond this point may exceed the FCC general public exposure limit. And I wondered how you did that. You admit on a sign that you're pumping out something that may exceed the limit.
Isn't that what the regulator is for?
Well, I don't know.
To stop that from happening?
Yeah, one would have thought so.
That's incredible.
Yeah. But this followed on a pattern that I was intrigued by the number of signs. I saw signs that you mustn't park. I saw signs that you shouldn't walk on this particular path. You shouldn't cycle on this particular path. You shouldn't take your dog on a particular path. There were so many warning signs. It actually, I think, beat UK in some areas at least.
Yeah.
Democracy, free country?
Not really, no. It is one of the most, California is famous for this, by the way. California is the most regulated of all states and societies, so
That's to keep it fresh for the beautiful people.
I'm not sure why, but it is pretty amazing when you go to some countries, the amount of freedom. In Europe, in some places, you can go and hike and walk across the fields or the Dartmouth, whatever. And you can't do that in the United States. In some places, they've really got it locked up, especially in California.
Okay, well, just putting a few of the topics that we've discussed together, and with an eye on the time, this is a document which we've shown before. It's come out of a book by the late Christopher Story, and the book was called The EU Collective Enemy of Its Member States. And in it was a chart which was supposedly from a Soviet defector saying that there was going to be a massive attack on Western democracies. And that attack was going to be done through all areas, through religion, education, media, culture, law and order, social relations, security. Things were going to be politicized, commercialized, made happy-clappy. Permissiveness was going to come in. What was the result? Well, the intended results are there. So education, you bring in permissiveness, relativity, and you end up with ignorance and zero historical knowledge. Now, this table I've always held in pretty high regard, because you say as time goes on, you can go through it and tick things off. Very comprehensive in areas. Family, foster, breakdown, destroy marriage. Well, that's going on, isn't it?
Yeah,
and they're saying that the result of that is it destroys loyalty and it leaves the state to claim it. So you break up the families, you can then take control, is what's happening there.
It's a really simple concept, Brian. If you break society down from the nation down to the individual, the strongest group, the strongest institution in society is the family.
Yeah.
It's the hardest to crack, and it's the one that you have the least control over. And if you can crack and break the family unit, that's the nut that really holds the
society together. Yeah.
If you can break that, if you can crack it, then you basically have complete full spectrum dominance over all areas social. So that to me is quite fundamental. It's quite simple.
Okay, well, what we showed on screen there was the demoralization phase. That was to be followed by destabilization. So here it's talking about getting a power struggle, the destruction of legal substructure, bargaining process, the destruction of industry and currency. These are all things which are starting to be talked about now. Breakdown of the monetary system, breakdown of law and order, breakdown of the military, and destroyed as the nation is consumed into multi-nation mechanisms. Well, that's exactly what the European Union is, isn't it? You're locking everybody together. And the document even says, I know it's difficult with the font on this screen, on the right-hand side, it says Big Brother appears in the wings in the EU context. So they're even using the phrase Big Brother. It's a very interesting document. You cannot say that the thing is a fake because somebody somewhere wrote it. But if you compare the document to what's happening in society, you can just tick it off.
So it is authentic on the basis of its accuracy.
There was a mind somewhere that created it. So encourage people to get hold of that. It's still possible to get hold of Christopher Story's book, EU Collective Enemy of Its Member States. Patrick, thank you very much for joining us. Just EU referendum, where do you think that's likely to go?
My personal opinion is, I've said this for a long time, I think it's likely to go nowhere. I think it's just a matador exercise, as they say in Spain.
Right.
Wave the cape and let the bull go through, but nothing changes. The arena remains the same, and all the entrances are locked.
Right. So do you believe that there could be a Brexit, a get-out decision?
I'd be surprised, Brian, if there was, but I really don't think that's going to be allowed to happen. Even if the public vote to get out, they won't let them out.
No.
That's my personal belief, that this has all been a dog and pony show, partly for the Conservatives to get elected in the last general election, to appear fair and anti-European, to steal some of the UKIP voters, which they needed, people on the fence, to pass the post in the last general election. But they're all committed Europhiles. to the last one of them. So I don't. There's no way.
So with the Brexit vote, we're still going to have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's not going to make a huge bit of difference because the currency, the banking, but more importantly, the military structure. The military, the EU army, or the formation of an EU army, that is the cement that will hold Europe together. Even if people want to leave, they can't, because the minute you have a European army that's engaged in some conflict somewhere, then it becomes a security issue.
Right. I'm going to stop you there, Patrick, and say we can cover that specific topic in another session. Thank you very much for joining us today. To all our viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing. We can only do what we do with your help. Thanks very much for joining us. Bye-bye.